Andrea Sampson is CEO and founder of Talk Boutique and blends her astute listening skills and insight into human behavior to coach leaders and speakers in crafting impactful stories. With over 2 decades in marketing and advertising, Andrea's prowess in connecting with audiences has transitioned into her role as a TED trained speaker coach, where she excels in making complex technical subjects relatable and esteemed. Her work extends to training Singularity University faculty globally and contributing to the TEDx initiative, underlining her commitment to shaping a future marked by kindness, equity, and sustainability. Through regular interviews with visionaries, Andrea fosters a dialogue on creating a better world starting now. And before we hop into the podcast, a quick word from our sponsor, Deep Wealth and the Deep Wealth Mastery Program. We have William, a graduate of Deep Wealth Mastery, and he says, I didn't have the time for Deep Wealth Mastery, but I made the time and I'm glad I did. What I learned goes far beyond any other executive program or coach I've ever experienced. Or how about Bruce? Bruce says, before Deep Wealth Mastery, the challenge I had with most business programs, coaches, or books was that they were one dimensional. Through Deep Wealth Mastery, I'm part of a richer community of other successful business owners. The idea shared forever changed the trajectory of the business, and best of all, the experience was fun. And we'll round things out with Stacy. Stacy said, I wish I had access to the Deep Wealth Mastery before my liquidity event, as it would have been extremely helpful. Deep Wealth Mastery exceeded my expectations in terms of content and quality. And you know what, my Deep Wealth Nation, why they're saying this is because Deep Wealth Mastery, it's the only system based on a 9-figure deal. That was my deal. And as you know, I said no to a 7-figure offer, and I created a system that we now call Deep Wealth Mastery that helped myself and my business partners welcome from a different buyer, a different offer, a 9-figure exit. So if you're interested in growing your profits, preparing for a future liquidity event, if that's 2 years away or 20 years away, and you want to optimize your post-exit life, Deep Wealth Mastery is for you. Please email success@deepwealth.com. Again, that's success, SUCCESS at deepwealth.com. We'll send you all the information about Deep Wealth Mastery, otherwise known as Scale for Ultimate Sale. That's where you want to be. You want to be with other successful business owners, entrepreneurs, and founders just like you who are looking to create market disruptions, and they want to lock in their financial freedom and have success and fulfillment. That's the 90-day Deep Wealth Mastery Program. It has your name on it. All you need to do is take the next step. Send an email to success@deepwealth.com. Deep Wealth Nation, welcome to another episode of the Deep Wealth Podcast. Well, you've heard me say it before, 80% or more of the value of your company, it's not in your financials, it's in your narrative, in your story, or you're out there prospecting, you want to land that big whale. Guess what? Sure, you have to have some of the facts behind you, but it's in the narrative and the storytelling that you're doing. So, rhetorical question, Deep Wealth Nation. Are you happy with your narrative? Do you want to do better? Do you want to welcome more success? Better yet, create a market disruption? And of course, you said yes. So that's what we're all about today. We have a very special guest. And I'm curious, Andrea, there's always a story behind the story. What's your story, Andrea? What got you from where you were to where you are today?
Well, thanks so much for having me today, Jeffrey. I'm really, really excited to be talking to your guests and talking to you about storytelling, one of my favorite things. So, when I look at my career, I have had an eclectic career. I spent the first 25 years in marketing and advertising. I was a strategist and a planner. I did all kinds of work in brand and response-oriented marketing, working with some of the largest agency networks in the world on some of the world's most recognizable brands. And I loved it. I loved it until I didn't. What happened for me as I went into the world of advertising was I had this real desire to create impact and change within the world. And I had come out of, prior to being in advertising, I was in the not-for-profit world. I was a fundraiser and I wanted to see impact. And so I thought, suddenly I'm in this world of advertising where they have $1 billion, billion budgets. And certainly, some of that could be put towards making a difference in the world. And so I was this idealist coming in, thinking that I could influence and persuade the work that I was doing in a way that would, maybe make the world just a little bit better, maybe make it more open to some of the things that, at the time were in the forefront. And to some degree, I did, things like, creating more diversity within advertising, showing women in a different way. Like these were things that, yes, I could influence. But 25 years in, I went, look, I think I've gone as far as I can. And I had this epiphany of, I am really an idealist in a capitalist world. And for me to actually do the things that I wanted to do, I knew I had to leave advertising, but I didn't know what I was going to be doing. And, I know that your guests are, so many of them are entrepreneurs building and scaling businesses. And it was never something that, for me, I looked out into the world and went, oh, gee, if I could just be an entrepreneur. It really wasn't in my mindset, but I went out anyway. I was still working in advertising. I actually just started doing volunteer work, and I volunteered. One of the places that I was very lucky to volunteer at was TEDx Toronto. Now, this was in the early days of the TEDx movement. And TED had been out forever. Of course, we were all familiar with TED Talks, and I used to love to watch them online. But I got this great opportunity to work on the TEDx brand. It was brand new. It was the second year, I think, or third year that it was being offered anywhere. And certainly Toronto was one of the first to have a license. And so I was hired as a speaker's coach. I'd never heard of a speaker's coach, didn't even know what it was. But I figured, look, at the time, I was a senior vice president of strategy for a very large agency. And I figured, you know what, give me a little bit of training on this TED thing. I'm sure I can figure it out. Well, it was a life changer. And, it took me 5 years to step away from my paycheck and become an entrepreneur. Although that's not fully true because I had been a consultant for many times, but I never considered myself an entrepreneur. Stepping into and building and creating my company, Talk Boutique, was really the first time that for me, as a professional, that I considered myself an entrepreneur. And that was a big game changer because what I did was I saw myself differently. I wasn't a consultant selling my hours back to the marketing and advertising world. Now I was creating something that had value, that created value for others, but had value in and of itself. And that was huge for me. And that story of being an idealist in a capitalist world was really the impetus for it because I didn't just want to build something for the sake of making money. I went back to those early roots in not for profit and went, what I really want to do is I want to make a difference in the world. And so, yes, we all want to make money. And of course, that was a part of it. But it wasn't the reason why I started the business. It was to create impact. And storytelling is a way for us to use who we are, what we do, and what we offer to the world and provide our value in such a way that others will change. And because of that, we start to create a different future.
Wow. Andrea, there is so much there to unpack. And from the world of big corporate, these big logos, these big brands, and now you do a 180 and you're out there helping smaller businesses, entrepreneurs, individuals. Let me ask you this, though, before we start diving into what you're doing. It's fascinating. And offline, you and I were talking about how storytelling, the power of the narrative, is a big part of what we do in Deep Wealth Mastery to really move the dial in getting results. What would some of the larger corporations and entities out there, what do they have going for them when it comes to storytelling that as an entrepreneur or a smaller business, I simply don't have right now, but I could have?
Great question. I think one of the things that I see, and I'll start off by saying even large organizations don't have this figured out, but the ones that are really successful do. And what it is that they have a vision or an idea of who they are that they have created alignment within their organization on. And what I mean by that is, so if we think of these visions, and we all have visions for our companies, visions and missions, we know we need these things. They allow us to see the future state of where we want to be. That's what a vision is. Who is it and what is it you're creating for the world? And therefore, how do you show up every day a little closer to that vision? Well, when you're a large organization, that's a difficult question because now, organizations are, and if we think of it, they are a legal entity ultimately is a story that we have legally said lives, right? When we file our articles of incorporation and say this is what we stand for, the law says that is a legal entity, and that legal entity has a story, and that's the story that we are all believing about that organization. And if you are a good leader, and I always like to say leaders are professional communicators, that is your job as a leader. And so if you are a good leader, what you've done is you've done a really good job of communicating that vision in such a way that every person within that organization has in some way aligned with that vision and is in lockstep with you in achieving that. And so as entrepreneurships, this is one of our biggest challenges because as entrepreneurs, often we are changing our vision. We have ideas that come along. Shiny object syndrome happens to all of us. And so learning how to resist the shiny objects syndrome and really focus on a vision. But then most importantly is being able to communicate that vision to the people who work with and for us. That is so essential. And that is your story. That is the story of who you are, why you do what you do, and the thing that makes you unique as a person and as a business that no one else does better than you. And we all have that, even those, many of us have some imposter syndrome to go, well, other people do it. Yes, they may, but no one does it like you because of your unique background, your unique experiences, your unique culture, whatever it is that is the sum total of who you are as the entrepreneur, as the thinker of that vision. You have brought something very unique, and aligning everyone in your organization on that unique vision is the key to achieving the success that you want to achieve.
So interesting there. So, Andrea, let me ask you this because it doesn't matter if you're a multi-billion or zillion dollar corporation or you're a startup and you're just getting going, $0 of business. Strategy, the strategy behind a narrative and the creation of a narrative. Now, I know some listeners in Deep Wealth Nation say, well, Jeffrey, if I was a gazillion dollar corporation, I have all kinds of narrative creators. I'd have someone like Andrea on the team doing all these things and a whole team around me. Okay, sure, give you that. That said, though, to create that narrative, to create that effective strategy surrounding the narrative and then implementing that in the company, that's accessible to everyone. So, where are we simply as entrepreneurs, founders, business owners, where are we getting it wrong? Is there the good old Pareto's law that, hey, we're making 20% of the same mistakes or issues that are creating 80% of our heartaches? What's going on there? Are there any patterns that you can share?
Yeah, I mean, look, of course, it's going to be different for every person. But if I were to generalize, I would say there's a couple of pieces that I see because I do work with a lot of leaders, globally and a lot of entrepreneurs. And I think the thing that I see, number one, is the vision isn't clear. And so they've developed a vision that is often more focused on a success measure than an aspirational goal that they're working towards. And there's a difference, right? We can be successful in the traditional sense of making money and building a business, but maybe not achieving that aspirational goal, something that's bigger than us, something that's purpose driven, something that gives us, back in when I was in the agency days, we used to call this a BHAG. It was the big hairy goal. And so what is your big hairy goal that you're trying to achieve that is way bigger than just making money in this world? Because money is a means. What's the end? What are you doing? So that's number one. And then the second thing along with that, so A, not having a clear vision, and B, not having values that are aligned to that vision. And, values are one of those things that we all kind of go, yeah, it's all good to have values. They're important. Well, actually, values are probably one of the most important things that we can have as business owners, because what it does is it gives us a decision-making structure. So when we have values as a business, as an entrepreneurship, it allows us to go back and go, does this decision align with the values that I said that I will adhere to? And does it get me closer to that vision? And now what you've got is a way to make better decisions. Now that might sound a little esoteric, but when you put it into practice and you operationalize it, it becomes a way of doing business. And it's what the big organizations do.
Okay, so I'm hearing you go through that and my wheels are turning. Andrea, my goodness, this could be not just an episode, it can be an entire series. So, having the entire team around us, having our values match the vision so everything is in sync. As you're talking about this, Could you share a story with us of perhaps someone who came to you, a company became a client, and they were trying to get from here to there, they were missing the mark, and where you came in? And I know you're absolutely right. Every company is different. Every situation is different. I give you that. Something that just gives us a sense of, well, hey, if this company was doing that and it wasn't happening, then they did this, it did happen. A little bit of inspiration for us. Anything that comes to mind?
Well, it's one that I'm working on right now. So we're working on a very large organization out of the US. They are an electronics association, and they are in the process right now of redefining who they are. And it's been an interesting process. They're an organization that has, for the last 60 years, led a very specific thing within the industry. They've done one thing and they've done it really, really well. And they're known for it. They are the leader. And it's not just in the US, they are a global organization providing their services globally. But that said, what has become clear, I mean, our world has changed. And if we think of electronics, it is what has really driven the growth and the innovation within our world, really. And it has changed. And I think we can all agree that 50 years ago, if you got an organization that's 50 years old, you might need to update a few things. And so where they are today, they're recognizing that there's an opportunity for them to step into, but they've got a 50-year-old organization who are with 50-year-old processes that are still working. Everything is working. There's nothing broken, and they could continue to do what they're doing. But eventually, that company wouldn't cease to exist because we can see it's probably on the other side of the life cycle, right? They will start to fall down. And so they had to make a decision about expanding their services and expanding their offering and changing their name and taking a risk. And it has been such an interesting process to go through that with them, because one of the first things that we had to do was to go, what's your new story? So first of all, what's the story of who you are today? And what's the new story you want to create? And so we did that. We worked with them. We do a program called Story Finding, where we literally use some of my background in branding. It's not a rebranding. That is not what I do, but we find their new story. And so we use some of those practices. So some of it was speaking to, people outside of the organization, speaking to people inside of the organization, speaking to clients, speaking to people who don't even know about them, but getting a sense of what was happening. And from that, then working with the organization to then ground what we learned from the external to then find the internal, and through both of those, using the lens of story. So using the archetypes of different stories, retell their story. And what was so fascinating as I went through this process, so everyone was in lockstep moving into it. Yes, this is exactly what we want to do. We want to expand, we want to change, we want to become something new. But then, of course, as you get into the messy middle of doing that and showing them what new could look like, suddenly everybody inside the organization started to scatter a little bit of, wait a minute. Well, we're still this other thing. This is what we do. And so we started to hear, and as we started to put pressure on, here's what you're becoming, what you're leaving behind started to get really, really difficult. And so, and even with their board of directors, because of course, the board of directors comes into this, right? And the board is like, yes, we want to change, but wait a minute, what are we leaving behind? And are we leaving something behind? And so it was fascinating as we go through this. What became so important was the definition of who they were becoming with the definition of who they were and how these two things came together. So the vision couldn't let go of who they were, and it shouldn't, right? Because that's history, that's important. But it had to leave enough room for who they were becoming. And so they're about to actually, I can't tell you who this is because they're actually about to launch this. But it was such a fascinating process to go through, to see them literally see themselves for the first time, truly see themselves. Because I think one of the things that we as organizations don't ever get the benefit of is looking in a mirror of how other people see us. And that's what we did with this organization. And that mirror showed them both what they liked and what they didn't like. And it forced us to go, okay, now how do we change it so we can all in some way align on that? And that's where they are.
You're going through that. It really sounds as though, no surprise here, that our mindset is just as important as any execution, as any strategy. And I'm wondering, you can share, Jeffrey, on base, off base. do you find that most of the time, and again, I know it's a very general question, but generally speaking, most of the time, as entrepreneurs, are we like the emperor with no clothes? We're seeing what we want to see, hearing what we want to hear, and just ignoring what's right in front of us to our detriment. And you're nodding yes. If that is yes, can you share with the Deep Wealth Nation, how do we break that cycle, that pattern?
Hey, Jeffrey, I couldn't agree with you more. So yes, I think we're humans. Let's face it, right? And so it's sometimes hard to see ourselves, and it's hard to see especially as entrepreneurs and as leaders. There's a lot of people who have a vested interest in telling us what they think we want to hear. And and we have to become more discerning in listening through what's being said. And our mindset is such a key to that, right? Because if we're in a mindset of imposter syndrome, which so many entrepreneurs often are, when somebody validates what we think, we're so incredibly grateful to have that validation, right? We're like, oh my God, thank God somebody else thinks like me. And what we have to learn to do is to yes, take the validation because it's important. If you are in imposter syndrome and you get somebody validating something, great. But take a step away from that and go, what's the agenda here? Who is that person? Why are they saying that? And if you are in imposter syndrome, I want you to do some work on getting through that because look, overcoming those limiting beliefs is going to be like taking a blindfold off of you and recognizing the value you put out into the world. And look, we do work on overcoming limiting beliefs with many of the leaders that we work with because it is so pervasive in especially the entrepreneurial world. I find that when I work with entrepreneurs, they're either showing up with a lot of bravado or showing up with a lot of humility. But regardless of which way they're coming through, there's often imposter syndrome somewhere lurking in there. And look, I am no stranger to that. I have had to go through my own process of coming through my own imposter syndrome. So listen through what's being told to you. Number one, don't react in the moment. I think that's the thing that I've had to learn right away is listen when somebody is validating what you're saying and giving you what you think you need in that moment. Take it in, be grateful for that, but take a beat. Step away. I'll get back to you tomorrow on that. I'm not going to make that decision. Thank you for that input. One of the things I like to do, and Jeffrey, you and I talked about it at the beginning. I have my AI transcript tool, and we do so much of our work these days online. It's one of the things that I have found to be incredibly beneficial is to record my conversations largely for me, but it's helpful for me to go back and read some of the things that I've re-listened to conversations to hear what in the moment I didn't hear. And it's really powerful.
Absolutely. Hear what in the moment I didn't hear. And Andrea, not to put you under the microscope, whether it's you, whether it's a client, what are we typically missing that is looking back so obvious, so important, but at the time it just, as the saying goes, went in one ear out the other?
It's what I would call the red flags or just the flags. They don't even have to be red. Often what will happen in the moment, somebody will be saying something to us that is really, like I said, flattering or validating or in some way giving us what we need. What we're not hearing in that is
Mhm.
the underneath of it. Like so often we'll get that flattery or that validation, and with it will be something that maybe we didn't want to hear. Maybe it's what we expected to hear. We still hear it in the moment, but we hear it with much less severity or gravity. Oh, yeah, they said that thing, but look, they really get what we do. They really understand us. They're going to take care of us. They have our best interest at heart. But when you go back and re-listen to or read through the transcript, you're like, but wait a minute. They said that thing. They did that thing. And so when we get out of the heat of the moment,
Mhm.
suddenly those flags become a little more clear. And then sometimes you'll even look through an entire conversation and you realize it wasn't just said once, it was said a bunch of times. Now that's a flag, but you missed it because it was always shrouded often in things that were giving you what you needed as a business owner, as a human, as an entrepreneur that maybe is trying to forge a new path. As humans, we do this. We look for that validation, we hear the positive, and we ignore the negative. Now, on the back end, from news, we remember the negative, we ignore the positive. But when it's with us, when it's for me, it's the opposite. And it's such an interesting psychological mindset thing.
And not that it's the focus of our time together today, Andrea. It's interesting, though, as you're talking about that, we can take that and put that back out there. Don't we all love to feel both valued and heard? Are we doing that with our team? Are we doing that with our clients? Are we doing that with prospective clients? Are we, in fact, are we really doing that with all of our stakeholders? And I suspect the answer is probably not, but we should be. And so, Andrea, if I take a step back, we've been talking about mindset. We've been talking about culture. Yes, strategy and execution is certainly a part of it. We are on what I love to call here at Deep Wealth the art side of not just business, but also of life. And when we combine both the art and the science, that's where the magic begins to happen. Now, speaking of magic happening, I know you're really doing some incredible things out there. Whether it's for me as an entrepreneur, as an individual, you can do some communications coaching with me. Or as a company, you have different, I love it, the storytelling, the story finding, the story building. You've broken all that out to help me go in there. I want to tackle what I think is a myth, and you can say, Jeffrey, on base or off base, because I know there's some people in the Deep Wealth Nation. They're saying, Jeffrey, yeah, I hear you. And Andrea, yeah, I hear you as well. I just was not born a storyteller. That just wasn't me. In fact, I'm not really even in sales because I'm not a salesperson. It's not what I do. I'm not a storyteller. What would you say to that kind of dialogue?
So, and I hear this all the time. Look, we work with a lot of individuals who come from very complex industries, scientists, academics, technologists, even artists. And what we find, of course, when we're in these complex places, storytelling, it's been trained out of you. Like there is no place for stories in science. We hear these things all the time. I'm not a storyteller. I don't know how to do that. It's not who I am. And here's the thing. We have been telling stories as humans since we've been living in caves. In fact, the very first language was story of the art on cave walls. Those are stories that we told to other tribes as we nomadically moved around. There's good hunting here. There's no hunting here. Someone died here. We told these stories to each other. Why? Because it's the way in which we as humans communicate. Our language is based on story. Everything we do is based on story. We just don't think of it that way. So we are all natural storytellers, but that doesn't mean we're all good storytellers. That's a different thing. And good storytelling can be learned. There's so many frameworks out there. And, I always say use a framework, but if you're going to use a framework, use one that's simple and easy, and there's everything from the hero's journey, which I would not say is simple and easy. It's a 16-point framework, which tells a great story. But if you and I are going to have a quick conversation, that's not the one I'm going to use. For me, I use one called the story spine, which is a really simple one, and I've modified it a little bit for my own purposes. But what I love about it is that it's 5 steps to telling a story. It's really easy. And what I've done with it is I've recognized that as business storytellers, we don't just tell stories, we tell stories that hold ideas. I talk a lot about this. Stories are carriers for ideas because when we take our idea, insert it inside of a story, what we've done is 2 things. 1, we've contextualized that idea in such a way that people understand it. And 2, people retell our story. And guess what happens? When they retell our story, our idea goes along with it. That is the basis of TED Talks. So the story spine, like I said, and I'll just quickly go through the 5 elements just so people have them, is really easy. The environment. Where is that story taking place? It's your sense of place. And you want specificity. It's not a tree, it's an oak. Tell us a little bit. Here we're playing with some brain science. What we want to do is engage the brain. We're giving the brain a way to connect with that story. And we want to activate the sensory cortices within the brain. So tell me what it smelled like. Tell me what it looked like. Tell me what you're hearing. I'm in the woods and I can smell pine in the air. The sky is blue and the birds are chirping all around me. It's a cold day in January and there is snow all around me. And you're there with me, right? You can hear it. You can smell the pine. You can feel the cold air. I might even add in, it's one of those days that's so cold and crisp that the hair inside your nose freezes. Right. So we give people something that they just really, really can feel. Secondly, who are the characters? So we start with the environment, then the characters. Who's in the story? Characters have names. They have short backstories, 1 sentence. We just need to know a little bit about them. Third, what's the issue, the conflict, or the opportunity? That's the reason you're telling the story. This is where most people make the mistake is that they jump into this place. They don't tell you the environment and the characters. They jump into the other day, this thing happened to me. Avoid that seduction. Start off, build people into it, then come to the thing that happened to you the other day. Fourth is what every good storyteller, and this is what gets missed when people don't tell good stories, is they tell you about the thing that happened the other day and then they end there. Well, the fourth thing is what we call the raising of the stakes or the tension point of the story. It's the and then moment. The other day, this thing happened to me, but then this other thing, make it bigger, give me a tension point. Now, that's four elements. At that fourth element, when you've got your listener at a point of tension, when they're leaning forward, sitting on the edge of their seat, this is your opportunity to insert your idea. What is it you want me to know? Why are you telling me this story? It's not about the story. It's what is your idea that you are now using that story to align with. You would insert it right there. And then the fifth element is the outcome. Okay. So I insert it in between the tension point and the outcome, an idea. If you are a business storyteller, you are using that story to convey an idea. You're literally creating a metaphor with that idea, with that story. But if you're not telling it for an idea, then it would be the five elements: the environment, the characters, the issue, conflict, or opportunity, the raising of the stakes, and then the outcome.
And as you're going through that default nation, I don't want you to get lost saying, hey, that's way too complicated. Because Andrea, you said something that really stood out for me. We are by design, we are born as storytellers. It doesn't guarantee, though, it doesn't mean that we are great storytellers. And like anything in life, there's a huge difference between good to great, hence the book with that title that came out a while back with that as well. And so I love what you're doing with your story spine strategy and Default Nation, where you're paying attention to that, because it's not just a formula, it's a best practice. It's survived decades and time, and I'm going to say centuries, because we've been doing this. In fact, whether you follow the Bible or you don't follow the Bible, no one can disagree with the fact that the Bible is the most popular book in the world. What's the subtitle of the Bible? The greatest story ever told. That says it all right there. And Andrea, to your point, we are storytellers. We love stories. In fact, Default Nation, I bet if you heard the first few notes of a song, even from when you were a teenager, which was for all of us just a few years away, right? But you hear a song that's from decades back. I bet you remember the name of that song and the words of that song, and you can hum along. Why? It's a story. Versus you went to a presentation and there's a boring presenter who's drawling along with these facts and these numbers and these stats in one ear out the other. You're not remembering any of it. So, Andrea, love what you're saying. Yes, we're storytellers, but no guarantee we're great storytellers. So if I came to you and said, okay, Andrea, I want to be a great storyteller. I want my team to be great storytellers. Can you take us behind the curtain? What's some of that magic sauce that you have of what are you doing? How long does it take? What am I going to be expected to be going through? Some of the results that I would be looking forward to. What does that look like with some of your systems?
Storytelling is one of those things that it is absolutely learnable, and it is down to the individual, however, because it's like being an athlete. Like, look, can we all ride a bike? Sure. Can we ride in the Tour de France? Probably not. What's the difference? It's practice and repetition. Right? Sure, there's natural skill. And, if we look at some of those bikers in the Tour de France, they've got some physical attributes that maybe some of us don't have. But in reality, so much of it is just reps. You got to do it. You got to do the work. And so storytelling is the same. You got to do the work. So, our systems that we run, like we work on individual coaching. We have a program called the Thought Leader Academy, which is a group coaching program. We work with corporations. We run cohort-based programs, which are typically anywhere from 8 to 12 weeks in duration. But the key to all of them isn't so much the program itself, but it's the person who is working on it and whether they are open to being a storyteller and doing the work. We have so many different frameworks. And in fact, we give out the frameworks, and I'm happy to offer that to your audience. We have something called the Storytelling Toolkit, which gives the story spine. It also has an idea framework, and it has what we call a talk canvas, which puts it all together. And using those, choosing to use them, because that's the piece. You can become a storyteller in a week if you do the work. That's the key. But do it again and again and again. Don't just do it in, like in your presentation. Oh, I'm going to try it out. I'm going to open my presentation with a story. First time you do it, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's probably not going to be very good. And it's probably going to feel really, really awkward for you. But you did it. Then you got to do it again. And then you got to do it again. And practice that story. The more you say it out loud, the less awkward it becomes. The words flow. Suddenly you start to see the connections yourself with your work, with what you're doing. So tell the story at a cocktail party, tell it to your family, bore everyone to death until you've got it down, because it's not about them. In that case, it's about you. But then it is about your audience, right? Your stories are for your audience because they're the way in which your audience can access your knowledge and information. And if you are just droning on and on, I was at an event a week ago with a presenter who gave that typical presentation slide by slide. To be honest, I tuned out halfway through. I couldn't even listen. Of course, as a speakers coach, I get access to very high quality speakers. And we do this, right? We never do that kind of presentation. And I forgot how incredibly boring it is. So, don't be that person. Be the person who brings us in with a story. And if I don't remember anything else, I will remember that story and I'll likely remember your name because you told me that. And so if I get nothing more as an audience member than who you are and an interesting story, the likelihood is I'll probably follow up with you in some way, go, hey, I want to hear a little bit more. That was really interesting. Tell me more. And that's what you want, right? So do the practice, do the work, take the risk, say it out loud. And the more you say it out loud, the better it's going to get. And you're going to find more stories.
So interesting. As you're talking about that, I'm just reflecting. In Default Nation, all of us, fortunately, most of us can walk. And when you first began, when you were a toddler, did it come naturally? Not really. You're stumbling around, you're falling, you're getting up, falling down, getting back up again. And it's the same thing with storytelling. And Andrea, what's so interesting as I look at presentations that I've given, and now I'm fortunate like yourself to be in circles where very elevated people, very successful people, I can tell the difference of a polished narrative versus one that isn't. And if I had to make a decision as a buyer, as an investor, as something else in between, it doesn't really matter. A company could be a better company, but they don't have a great narrative as a similar company, which has a great narrative, maybe not as good as the other one. I'm probably going to go with the better narrative. It's, hey, don't shoot the messenger. These aren't the rules. It's just human nature. It's what we're all about. And you're right. We tend to remember what stands out for us, what had us laugh or cry or is memorable or really enjoying a story. And Andrea, offline, you and I were comparing notes of how both of our programs get into the science of the narrative. And what's amazing, an effective storyteller, not any storyteller, but an effective storyteller, the science shows that the listener who's just sitting there, they're not doing anything, the areas of the brain that are lighting up in the person who's sharing that narrative when it's a good storyteller, those same areas of the brain light up in the listener. So what does that tell you? We are synced in ways we're just beginning to understand. So it's amazing. And Andrea, my takeaway is practice makes perfect. Keep on practicing and take your craft to a whole other level. So Andrea, let me ask you this. I know there are so many questions I didn't have a chance to ask. Is there one question I didn't ask, or is there a message that you'd like to get out there, or even a topic that we haven't yet covered that you'd like to put out there before we go into wrap up mode?
When I think about the messaging that we put out into the world, and I think this is probably the thing, like we've talked all around it, but I actually want to bring it out, which is, you as an entrepreneur, as the visionary of your company, you get to choose the narrative you're putting into the world. That's your choice. You are not at the effect of the world. You are actually in control of that. There's not a lot in our world that we're in control of, but that's one of the things you are. And so as a business leader, and I said it before, your job is to be a professional communicator. And the way that you get there is through storytelling. Because when you tell your business as a story, people remember it. They remember why you do what you do. They remember how you do it. And so if you don't have a story for your business, I encourage you to take some time, use whatever tool works for you. Write that story and know it, be able to tell it. I end up being on a lot of podcasts, and it's one of my favorite things to do because, what I love about being on podcasts, and this is one of the things I would encourage the listeners on as well, is that when you are with somebody who doesn't know you or your business all that well, maybe they've read some things, maybe they've had a conversation with you in advance, but in reality, we're sort of meeting in this place of not really knowing each other. And that person will ask you questions that no one else has ever asked you. And in doing that, you will tell your story in a way you've never told it before. And by doing that, you start to hear yourself saying things that are messages that you actually want to get out into the world. So tell your story as often as you can. Write it down, figure out what that story is, and then find places where people will ask you questions you've never been asked. So if you have the opportunity, say yes to podcasts. If you have the opportunity, get on stages. If you have the opportunity, get in front of new audiences and tell your story and let people ask you questions and hear what comes out because it might surprise you.
So interesting because it's out there, but I'll put it back in here. Two things as you're talking about that, it reminds me of more of the successful comedians before they go out there in front of a stadium full of a gazillion people. In the comedy clubs, they'll be testing different lines. Did I get a laugh? Did I get silence? Even worse, did I get
That's
some
right.
kind of reaction? And I'm going to throw out what doesn't work and I'm going to build on what is working. And Default Nation, I've never really described it in this way. I'm going to put it out there though. Oftentimes, when people hear my story, they say, Jeffrey, it was the same company, your e-learning company, Embanet, from seven figures to nine figures. Same company, you weren't buying other companies. It was less than 2 years later. How did you go from seven to nine? And you know what, Andrea, a different way of approaching that, I would say it was the story. And I know
Yeah.
people are going to say, come on, Jeffrey, you're telling me that the story went from seven figures to nine figures? Yes, it was. The narrative that we crafted and from the system that we now call Deep Wealth Mastery, that was behind that. We simply showed up, Andrea, when the seven figure offer came around. Yes, it was a wolf in sheep's clothing. I give you that. I also need to take responsibility. I was not prepared. I did not have the narratives. I showed up like most other business owners and probably gave the same typical answers everyone hears. What makes your company different or special? Well, we're great on customer service and everyone loves us and boring. I tell you though, when it came time for the next go around, when we were out in market, and this time we had Deep Wealth Mastery behind us, we had the narratives down. We were telling stories, people were listening, they were laughing. And it was interesting. We walked in as strangers, all of us, whoever was listening, and we actually came out as friends. We were
Yeah.
talking and we were joking afterwards, and there was a camaraderie, a bond that formed from a story. It's amazing. So, Deep Wealth Nation, what Andrea is sharing, please take that to heart. We're going to come back to that, but for the moment, Andrea, I want to go into our wrap up mode here. It's a tradition here on the Deep Wealth Podcast. It's really my privilege and honor. I ask the same question to every single guest. It's a really fun question. Let me set this up for you. When you think of the movie Back to the Future, you have that magical DeLorean car that will take you to any point in time. So here's the fun part. Andrea, it's tomorrow morning. You look outside your window. Not only is the DeLorean car curbside, the door is open, is waiting for you to hop on in, which you do, and you're now going to go back to any point in your life. Andrea, as a young child, a teenager, whatever point in time it would be, what would you tell your younger self in terms of life lessons or life wisdom? Or, hey, Andrea, do this, but don't do that. What would that sound like?
So if I could go back in time, I would probably go back to my 30-year-old self, 30,
Mhm.
31. That was the year that my daughter was born. And I go back to that not because of that's when she was born, but that was, I think, the moment for me that I really stepped into my own expertise and really owned what I knew. But what I wasn't doing, I was stepping into it, but I wasn't owning it. And I
Mhm.
think the message that I would give to myself in those days is what you know is more than you think, and be aware of your knowledge, but also be open to what others have to say. So don't take everything like a criticism, take it like new information and be open to learning through different perspectives. Because I think for me, the challenge I had at that point in my life was I was so focused on learning and was living in a world of, well, either that's a fact or that's not a fact, that I had to learn that facts are never facts. They're always interpretive. And so when we recognize that there are different ways of seeing things, it allows us to grow more quickly. And so I think I could probably have kept myself from some heartache had I have known that.
It's really interesting, Andrea, as you're sharing that, because on the one hand, you're giving yourself a pat on the back. Hey, you actually know more than you think you know. So don't get that imposter syndrome or don't feel like you're out of place. Then on the other hand, you're really encouraging, okay, that said, you don't know everything. And if someone has a criticism, be open to it. Maybe they're not right, and that's okay. But what if there's some element of truth? Listen to that, learn from it, grow from it. And that's a 1-2 combo that's very powerful. I absolutely love that in terms of some life advice. So, Andrea, before we wrap things up, somebody has a question. They want to work with you. They want to learn about your coaching or your workshops or how they can take their company to the next level. Where would be the best place online to find you?
Yeah, so absolutely follow me on, we have a YouTube channel, talk.boutique. So it's Talk Boutique with a dot between talk and boutique. And I do all kinds of videos on the work that we do and give lots away. They can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm very, very active there. And of course, check out our website, talkboutique.com, and sign up for our newsletter or reach out to me directly at Andrea at Talk Boutique. I'm always open to having new conversations. Absolutely love it.
Love that. Deep Wealth Nation, you have Andrea's email address. Take her up on that. Reach out to her. And by the way, all of this is in the show notes. It doesn't get any easier. It's a point and click. Just go to the show notes. It's all there for you. Well, Andrea, it's official. Congratulations. This is a wrap. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey. I so appreciate this call. This opportunity has been a lot of fun talking to your audience.
So there you have it, Deep Wealth Nation. What did you think? So with all that said, and as we wrap it up, I have another question for you. Actually, it's more of a personal favor. Did you find this episode helpful? Have you found other episodes of the Deep Wealth Podcast empowering and a game changer for your journey? And if you said yes, and I really hope you did, I have a small but really meaningful way that you can actually help us out and keep these episodes coming to you. Are you ready for it? The dramatic pause. I'll just wait a moment. Drum roll, please. Subscribe. Please subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast on your favorite podcast channel. When you subscribe to the Deep Wealth Podcast, you're saving yourself time. Every episode automatically comes to you. And I want you to know that we meticulously craft every one of our episodes to have impactful strategies, stories, expert insights that are designed to help you grow your profits, increase the value of your business, and yes, even optimize your post-exit life and your life right now, whatever you want that to look like. And every time you subscribe and a fellow entrepreneur subscribe, it's a testament to how together, yes, we are changing the social fabric of society. One business owner at a time, one liquidity event at a time. So don't let the momentum stop here. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast channel. You'll never miss an episode. You'll be the first to hear from the top industry leaders, the innovators, the disruptors that are really changing and shaping the business world. And maybe you're commuting, maybe you're at the gym, maybe you're taking a well-deserved break that we spoke all about on this episode. The Deep Wealth Podcast, it's your reliable source for the next big idea that could literally revolutionize your business. So once again, please hit that subscribe button, stay connected, inspired, and ahead of the curve. And again, your next big breakthrough moment, it might just be one episode away. Maybe it was even this episode. So all that said, thank you so much for listening. And remember, your wealth isn't just about the money in the bank. It's about the depth of your journey and the impact that you're creating. So let's continue this journey together. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for listening to this episode. And as we love to say here at Deep Wealth, may you continue to thrive and prosper while you remain healthy and safe. Thank you so much. God bless.